Hello everyone, Michael Devine here, Gray Matters Radio. I'm America's Counselor. What's going on, everyone? Now, we're missing one person, but we get the addition of two people in the studio today. The armchair couldn't make it because, frankly, well, he has kids, and I guess he has to do the dad thing and not let kids run around wild. And so, unfortunately, we take a hit here in the studio sometimes, but it's all right, though. Our cannabis correspondent, Don Busilla, the Everyman. What's up, buddy?
Hi, Mike.
How you doing, man?
Awesome.
Yeah,
Fun to be back in the studio again.
It is kind of nice, isn't it?
It is.
I kind of, it's usually you're kind of like, we're on our, on location, but you're actually back in the Gray for once.
I know, right? We have done quite a few location shots.
We've done Colorado. We've done 710 Labs. We've done the snowboarding competition, the rail jam.
That was pretty cool.
We've done Green Harvest Health. You really have been our.
I make you go on the road and pack all your stuff up and just make your life difficult, right?
I know. I'm actually excited. We got like this really cool tool, so I don't have to bring like an entire mixer. I can just plug it into the laptop, so I don't have to lug all that around.
There we go.
So, it's all right, but it challenges me to get better.
Well, there you go. So I guess that's why I'm here, huh? To challenge you, apparently.
I mean, you are my brother-in-law. I mean, technically speaking, it really should be the opposite. Shouldn't I be challenging you?
Pretty much.
Isn't that usually how it works with the in-laws?
Like pretty much. I should, be pining for your love.
Yeah, you should. Fuck. I've totally got this wrong. This whole time I've been doing like the opposite. Like, I gotta make them like me, But now, really, it's the opposite. I should be doing.
Time to flip the script, man.
Well, I am 40 now, so I look at there's kind of like chapter 1 and chapter 2. And so now chapter 2 in my life is going to be like doing things differently. Apparently now, my brother-in-law, I can make him earn my love and respect.
There we go.
Oh, I love it. God, I'm going to have a lot of fun with this.
I just try to bring you cool shows.
Yeah. Do you think you can get me some coffee? Damn it. All right, I'm not going to try it right now.
Well, I'd have to take off the headphones, make some noise. It'd make bad radio.
Yeah, and I get a little flustered when everyone starts making noise, getting in the middle of the broadcast. It kind of does throw everything off a little bit for me. So yeah, maybe don't do that. I mean, that's all right. I got some coffee here. So you can tell by maybe the lighting. It's a little bit brighter in here. So we're not recording at night. So I'm not drinking bourbon like I normally do. I'm drinking coffee. Because usually we record in the evening. So it's a little bit different.
It's a morning show now.
It is a little different in the morning, I'm not going to lie. I don't know if I'll be as witty. I don't know if I'll be slower. But maybe I'll be more constrained and more on task. What do you think?
This will be an interesting test.
I guess it'll be up for the listeners to figure it out, So I guess we'll figure it out, right? So what are we talking about today? So usually on this show, we're always going over something and talking about something, social kind of importance. One of the biggest ones we've been seeing a lot, in the news with medical marijuana, legal marijuana. I mean, it seems like every other day there's a new state where basically it's getting approved. As our sponsor, we've had you on the show lots of times talking about the challenges of being in this industry. And it's always cool. We've talked with every angle of this industry, right? We've talked to the producers. We've talked to the medical professionals doing the evaluations. But we've never actually had a dispensary on here, let alone a dispensary in a state where, it's kind of new. I mean, this is something that's really only been really rolling for about a year. So we had to tap into our network of people, and the good folks at Terrasana, decided hey, we're going to come on Gray Matters. Unfortunate, for them, but they decided to come on.
You're on the hot seat. Uh-oh.
So all right, with that being said, Emilie Ramach, the Director of Outreach for Terrasana here in Columbus. What is up?
Hi there. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah. You doing all right?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for coming on the air and everything.
Yes.
I mean, this is, it's always cool when we get to, our big thing on this show is, it's not about taking sides one way or the other. It's really about exploring a topic from a 360-degree view. And this is the one area we have not been able to get somebody on. And so when we had the opportunity to bring Terrasana in, I'm super excited about this, even though it's Monday, and it would be cooler if it was on a Sunday. But because it's so hard to get you guys in, we decided, all right, we'll bring you in on a Monday.
Well, in our industry, we call it Monday.
Meunier.
It is Meunier. I'm feeling a little Meunier today, are you?
Meunier.
You know, hashtag Meunier.
There you go.
How do you spell Meunier anyway? Do you like text it to each other?
Monyay.
Monyay.
Hashtag.
Hashtag Meunier.
Hashtag Meunier.
Use it.
All right, so I guess we're gonna roll with that, all right? So before we kind of dive in, I would love to know about you. Like, how did you find yourself in this industry? Because you've been in it for a little bit, and you've been in it long enough to where I imagine family members were like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, this is the industry."
That's one way to put it.
This is the industry you're going to. It's kind of like you have people that are video game design, and when like maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, when kids told parents this is what I'm going to major, and they were angry, right? I ain't going to pay for that, and then now that their kids that are doing that are probably helping pay for their parents' retirement.
Well, right, and it's amazing now too. You know, you have these other universities and colleges, and even the Cleveland School of Cannabis that are offering full degrees.
Yeah, it's been an interesting switch because as a clinician, you know, I remember sometimes when I knew there were conditions that actually, whether it be CBD, cannabis, whatever, I felt kind of weird even suggesting. Now I have parents asking me about it, whether it be with like autism, anxiety, sleep, addiction. I mean, legitimately, people are now asking about it. So it's just been this giant groundswell of change that's happened so damn quickly. I mean, so what got you into it? Like, what made you go, I want to get into the cannabis industry?
It's kind of it's an interesting story. Been in the medical cannabis industry the majority of my professional career. My best friend, he lost his struggle with pancreatic cancer about 10 years ago. And after that, I dove into all things medical cannabis education. And then I looked into medical cannabis legislation and realized, too, that, you know, these patients should be able to have the option of at least trying alternative medicine. So I dove into that here in Ohio. I love to describe my life at that time as young, dumb, and passionate because none of us really knew how to really approach these legislative government officials, just especially about something so kind of unknown and forbidden at the time.
But that's, and honestly, I think that's a great
very
point.
taboo.
Yeah, because like, I mean, I remember growing up, whether not even just about pot or anything, it's been about where like something that you believed in, and we were in college, and I did even poli-sci was my minor, and so it's to try to figure out it's one thing organizing a bunch of people, right? It's a whole other thing to organize them and figure out how do I actually influence legislation. And that was the thing where, at least I feel like us Gen Xers, you know, because I graduated undergrad around 2003, and I felt like we never could figure that one out. And then now it seems like the biggest activists now are kids, or like college kids, or people that were just, and then all of a sudden everyone's taken that blueprint, and now, I mean, I think a lot of the laws that have been passed has been because of that social activism,
right? Which is really awesome. You know, I always encourage everyone and anybody to go out and, you know, be an activist. You know, be proud of what you believe in and go out there, and because you never know, you know, when that next push is going to be. But yeah, so I dove into that, and through my time in legislation, I met a woman who actually graduated from Oaksterdam University, which is, if, you know, for those that do not know, it's actually located out in Oakland, California. It's a brick and mortar college that's actually been studying and providing cannabis education since the mid-90s.
Oh, wow.
Which is really, really cool. And so she graduated from there, and I told her, look, like, I want to learn everything and anything I can about this plant. Because after my best friend passed away, I had dove into the research and had come across, you know, cannabis helping with appetite, helping with, just different things that we now know, and there's scientific data to back it up, that it does help the quality of life in cancer patients that are going through chemo. So at that time, her and I decided to move out to Colorado. We were out there, and I learned, you know, everything and anything from dispensary management to cultivation to processing.
Wow.
And really just gave it my all out there, and moved back to Ohio. Ohio is my home. I grew up in Cleveland, and from there on out, I just kind of continued my cannabis education, more or less just becoming a medical marijuana consultant and helping families kind of navigate what states to go to, legal states to go to in order to get treatment for their loved ones, for themselves, to kind of be able to try something other than the normal pharmaceutical way.
Yeah, and you actually even run a nonprofit, don't you?
I do, absolutely, yeah. And so through that journey, I founded my nonprofit, Compassionate Alternatives, which then helps patients financially afford their medical marijuana referrals. So we raise money in order to help those patients be able to afford it. Because a lot of these patients too, they're struggling financially with all their medical bills. A lot of these patients have lifelong chronic illnesses. So to be able to afford, that out-of-pocket cost for their medical marijuana referral is out of reach for a lot of patients. So yeah, I did end up finding a nonprofit.
Well, it seems like with cannabis, it's always been this kind of thing where you have to you almost need help and advocacy because I don't know how many stories you've heard, like the Charlotte's Web strain of marijuana that really that was like the first. I think a lot of times people somewhat believed about well, I can understand maybe with nausea and appetite, stimulation with cancer, right? But I think a lot of people really didn't buy into the fact that, oh wow, this can actually treat other conditions. And that Charlotte's Web strain where you had parents picking up their families and moving to Colorado, California, where it was legal to get their kids treatment. That seems that was to me that big switch and change. But then it's still messed up though that here we are 2019 and we still need organizations to make sure people either can afford, the medicine they need. Where do you go? Where can you find it? There's a big one right here, right now with autism, where they're really trying to get it to where you can add new illnesses basically to the state's, a list of approved medical conditions, but it's so tough to get it approved, and they're trying to get autism approved, and they just can't. It's one thing if it's a condition for an adult, but I think it's a whole other set of hoops to jump through if it's a child.
It is. And, cannabis and pediatrics is a whole another side of the industry that I really feel like needs to be brought to light because you do have a lot of R&D and clinical data that suggests that cannabis does help autism and anxiety also, especially in children. So I think just a lot of that education just needs to be talked about and people need to kind of be open to those ideas.
So and this is probably a good way, I think a good segue kind of, into I was trying to really think carefully about, hey, if we're having somebody on the dispensary side, hey, what are the angles that we really haven't even covered yet that were really kind of important? And I think number one, I think it's kind of bringing your industry to life, basically. Kind of okay, really, what is the business that Terrasana is in? And and almost why did they go into the business? What does it mean to the owners? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to the organization? And, what do you think people need to know about why Terrasana is in business and what their mission statement is?
Sure. And that's a great question. I was recently reminded this past week that we cannot forget the why behind our industry. Yeah. What brought us together as industry professionals and activists, and that why is the patient. The most important thing for people to recognize, whether they're patients, caregivers, healthcare professionals, policymakers, is that cannabis is medicine, and this industry is based on real science. We all have an endocannabinoid system, otherwise known as the ECS, which is made up of receptors that actually exist in our bodies naturally. And the discovery of these receptors basically happened in 1992, so fairly recently, that we discovered the endocannabinoid system. Cannabis produces several compounds, and when a person consumes cannabis, the cannabis cannabinoids interact naturally with our ECS, or endocannabinoid system, and that's how we can absorb the cannabis as medicine. So I think the majority just of that education really needs to be talked about. At Terrasana too, we strive to really produce that educational content. We actually are going to be launching our brand new website that will have all of this content available to all of our patients, so they can really go on and learn why cannabis works so well with our bodies naturally.
And I think that's a thing I think people really don't understand. I know a lot of times people I talk to, it almost seems they don't even understand why it works.
I'll have conversations and bring that up, and people look at you like a deer in headlights. They don't even know how it works, what our endocannabinoid system even is. And I always just try to say the simplest way is when you consume cannabis, it puts your body in harmony.
Absolutely, and that's a great way to put it. And it's as simple as Googling. You can go online, Google the endocannabinoid system. You will be flooded with information, but it's just really amazing, the symbiotic relationship that our bodies have with, the endocannabinoids and just cannabinoids in general. Even with CBD, THC, we're learning now with CBN and CBG, and there's all these different cannabinoids now that are being discovered that all have their individual places and special jobs within our bodies. It's just really, really fascinating stuff.
And going back to what you and I talked about, when sometimes you're talking with folks who just have that wall up of whatever that wall is, that even if it's the leftover reefer madness mentality, that
Absolutely.
it'll be something as simple as just Google that and do some reading, and that's it. And leave it at that.
Yeah, and it's funny, I heard recently also, that people say that they believe in cannabis. Well, cannabis is not a religion. Cannabis is science.
Yeah,
there you go.
And I think that we were talking to a couple people about this. When we were talking with Dr. Wilson from Green Harvest Health, and that one of the biggest things that we kind of talked about is that you do have a lot of people out there making claims about what it can do, and it really, it's like there's no evidence for that. And it's like you take like snake oil sales, basically people saying, oh, it can do this, it can do this, it can do that, but then it's almost like by doing that you almost take away from the legitimacy of the stuff that we know for a fact it really kind of helps out on. And it's just, you have to educate people on what is fact, what is fiction.
Sure. On my side of the business, I have a lot of clients that we work with, and when it gets to an underwriting place and they're looking at websites and going through that, we have to protect what the public is seeing. And sometimes there's arguments with merchants and clients that they want to have those claims of what it can and cannot do, but again, without that pure scientific fact, and that's out there. And so patients and consumers have to really understand what it is they're reading, where they're reading it, what the claims are, and actually what is real, and what may be inflated, if you will, because it doesn't work the same for everybody.
Know your source.
Now, you're saying, like, you mentioned, like, you guys are doing a lot of education kind of programs. Like, how much do you take into account, like, okay, what do we need to really educate people on? And what is, like, the whole, like, when you look at what is your main goal of your education programs and how you're hoping it can help out your clients?
Essentially, the majority of the education that we are launching currently is, we start kind of with the basics, simplicity, how to get your card, what are the 21 qualifying conditions, what are the steps needed that the patient should take in order to get their medical marijuana referral. From then on, we can extrapolate it out, why does cannabis work with our bodies so naturally? We don't ever say that cannabis is a replacement for any kind of pharmaceutical medication. It just, it helps. It helps you feel better, and more or less just is a good kind of addition to a healthy lifestyle regimen. It helps with all things naturally in your body, from your metabolism to your brain health. So really I think the majority of the education is just so much, just the history of the plant, why it works in your body, real life data, R&D, clinical studies that show that this actually is a real thing, and it is science, and there are legitimate facts to back this up.
Yeah, and it has to be exciting to be able to like especially now that I think a lot of research is kind of last probably like year or two has kind of come out where it's kind of like, no, here's a research article. This ain't like Bob from down the street. It's like no, like Dr. So-and-so, Dr. That has to be the coolest part about it.
It is really cool. And honestly, too, the West Coast, they have been kind of in the cannabis space now for a little over 10 years. They've done the studies. They've had this, continuing, ongoing R&D. I was just at the Cannabis Science Conference last week, and, you have all these amazing scientists that are studying cannabis internationally that are bringing this education here. So I think for a lot of these states that are out on the West Coast, they've already moved past the stigma and past kind of the stubborn reefer madness mentality, and have moved on to, really viewing it, as what it is. I think over here we are playing a little bit of catch up as far as our education and kind of changing our mindset. But we all have to start somewhere. Ohio has the same growing pains as a lot of other states have had before us. So I really think it's just, being patient with ourselves and just really being open about our cannabis use and educating those that, may have a different point of view than you.
Is there really much to learn from, like, let's say California, Colorado, where, I mean, the mentality about marijuana is there's a reason why it was legalized California, Colorado, Washington, or first, right? Obviously the status quo. I mean, is there really much to learn about educating the public, out there versus here? Because in Midwest, I mean, it almost seems like it took a long time for Ohio to really come along, even public opinion. So when you look at what the dispensaries and everyone learned out there of educating the public, do you must have to kind of rip out that playbook and come up with your own for out here?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. You have to know your audience. You have to know what the patients are, where they're coming from, their backgrounds. Everyone comes from a different walk of life. And so, here in Ohio, the average age is 40 to 69. And so when we're out educating these patients and we're out talking to them, you're really talking to more or less the older generations, right? So we have patients that have been seasoned recreational users for their entire life. And so they're very open and, they're just kind of excited that they're able to go into a dispensary for the first time.
Yeah. And legally get it.
And legally purchase, sure. Exactly. And then you have patients who, they tried it 20 years ago and now they want to kind of revisit that experience. And we have to tell them, well, look, it's a little bit different now than it was about 20 years ago. There's a lot of new stuff going on. And then, like I said, we have patients that are completely brand new. The favorite story I love to tell is that an elderly couple came in within the first couple weeks that I had opened the Grandview location, our first location to open up, and she was trying to purchase for her husband who had Parkinson's. And so, she's asking me all these questions like, okay, so should I put this in my tea? Like, do we grind it up? And it was just such an amazing, almost eye-opening experience to be able to just provide that education. I've been a cannabis educator for, like I said, the majority of my career. So just to kind of have those really kind of organic, natural, conversations with the patients has just been a really incredible experience. So I have to say it really just depends on the audience,
Would you say that's kind of when we're talking about why are we in this business? It's like, is it kind of like for moments like that? It's like
it absolutely is. And in all parts of the industry, whether you're, the big corporate owners, the dispensary owners, the cultivator owners, down to, the bud tenders and the patient activists, we can get so caught up in the day-to-day that I think we really all need to take a moment and pause in each day and remember, what this industry is for. And it's for the patients at the end of the day. It's for patient education. It's to help people and patients feel better. It's to help teach them about their endocannabinoid system, about why this medicine is natural. It grows from the earth. It's a completely natural plant and can be used so many different ways. I mean, the education is really it's endless, essentially.
I think especially when you see a lot of addiction and, I can't remember, it was like, I want to say it was like 80%. I should have had that number off the top of my head, but, it's Monday.
Well, the intern's off today.
I know it's Monday, but yeah, they were talking about how it was like, I think it was like 80 or 82% of people who go on, like people above the age of, I think it was like 40, who develop a opiate addiction. It was like 80% was because of like an injury, and then it started like that. So when we're seeing,
well, yeah,
a lot of it happens so fast.
I had my injury and I was turning down opioids because they were trying to shove them down my throat, and I said, no, I don't. I want them. I'm sorry. Like, cannabis was much better for me.
Absolutely.
And actually,
even when I was at the conference this past week, so Olivia Newton-John, she's battling cancer again, but they had her as one of the keynote speakers, and and that was really, really incredible. But she said that she even she had a slight addiction to opiates for painkillers while she was battling breast cancer, and started taking cannabis, and has since come off all the opiates. So even someone of her caliber will say, is even can fall to that type of addiction. So it is really upsetting.
Well, I think even with like what we're learning about CBDs and the terpenes and the anti-inflammatory properties, I think a lot of times in the past, what I always heard from people, oh, whatever, it's just an excuse to get high, and it's like, well, no, because, a lot of times for painkilling properties, like I don't even need the THC component to it, the CBD terpene part to it, the anti-inflammatory. So it's like, all right, try again, guys. Like,
absolutely, right. And especially from an educational standpoint, we're trying to educate patients the power of microdosing. You don't necessarily need to be completely high, stoned, ripped, whatever verbiage you want to use there. Especially for these cancer patients, chronic pain, the elderly, everything on Ohio specifically, that qualifying list, you really maybe only need a hit or two off your dry flower vape. And that will last you, 4 or 5 hours. And really the goal for that is to alleviate those symptoms of whatever chronic illness that you have. So I think that's a crucial point, just in any kind of educational piece when we are speaking with the patients inside the dispensary and when I'm out educating. Microdosing is definitely a big thing to help.
I mean, honestly, that's a big thing in psychiatry. I mean, one of my old partners is a psychiatrist, and we were talking about stimulant medications, and he goes, the biggest problem that people are having while they're developing intolerance is that everyone wants like this big giant smack across the face, but really it's about, you shouldn't feel the stimulant. It should be totally in the periphery, and then people then get used to that intense kind of feeling, and then it's kind of inherent in American culture. For it to work, you have to feel it.
Absolutely, and that was one of the main themes of the conference this past week was microdosing, and that essentially, if you want to get high, you can get high, but really for the majority of people that are sick, they really just want to feel better.
And do you think that's a big misconception the general public maybe has in regard to the difference between recreational use and medicinal use?
Yeah, absolutely, I do.
Yeah. And that has to be like, when you're looking at, it's funny because we're seeing a lot of that with psilocybin, where the microdosing of it is actually being used as a treatment for treatment-resistant depression. Ketamine, which was typically a club drug, now is a nasal spray in a controlled environment. It's like they're really thinking outside the box for conditions anymore, and it's all about the microdosing. Even with MDMA, with ecstasy, it was like the club drug, and they originally approved it. It was like in the late 70s as an antidepressant, but because it did so much damage and the addictive properties of it, they never approved it. But then now they're going back with microdosing with PTSD and soldiers, actually realizing with microdosing with that. So you see with this a lot of times, even with like a non-psychotropic drug like AZT for AIDS treatment, when they initially came out with it, it wasn't working and it was making people sick, and then they doubled it up, the dosage, and tripled up. And then what they actually realized, like, no, we have to go the opposite direction, use less of it for it to work. And so it's you see this with so many different treatments and medicines. Yes,
and I love this trend. I really do, especially just when you're talking about the power of THC and the psychoactive properties. When you do kind of break that down and you microdose that, I mean, it has so many other properties to it, healing benefits, inflammatory or anti-inflammatory, etc. It really is an amazing trend that this is catching on, and we're able to educate about it.
So, like, when you look at, like, I think a lot of times with growing up in college, it was like, hey, what's the strongest, right? And I'm sure with recreational, it very much does come down to how intense, right? But when it comes down to like a buying process for medicinal, and as far as like what you guys look for, what like quality, even the strains that you're getting, and even determining like from like a stock perspective, right? I mean, as a grocery store, you're going to stock things that people use, right? So do you have to sit there and pay attention going, well, 47% of people are coming in with this illness, so these strains. So how does that all work with what you buy, what you guys look for medicinal?
Sure, absolutely. Well, we look for the finest cannabis available. Many of the cultivators and processors here, especially in Ohio, are new to the industry. So we, as a dispensary, have to take extra care to find the products that meet our standards. So flower, that has to be well cured, an accurate representation of the strain and lineage, because we do have a lot of patients who are seasoned, who know exactly what the THC and CBD breakdowns and percentages are of those particular strains that they like. So it comes down to that. Processed products must meet the quality standards patients have already seen in other legal states. We care very much about curating the menu to include the finest, live resin, rosin, shatter, vapes, etc. Now that we're able to really have the full gamut of our menu, we understand the science that creates the most appealing process. So, it really just it comes down to what we think is the best for our patients, and a really a wide gamut of being able to help alleviate a lot of these symptoms that they have from their chronic illness.
When it comes down to like a quality, is there a big difference, between like, let's say, states where it's medicinal and recreational? I mean, I imagine with medicinal, I think like chain of custody, I think testing procedures. I mean, I know with like alcohol, you have to test for things as well, but is it like, do you have like your own internal metrics? It's more of a state deal. Like, how's that work with making sure the product is medical grade?
It's definitely per state. Yeah. Every state has their own, because we're still kind of battling this Schedule 1. It is up to the individual states, and the states that do have recreational and medicinal, the products do seem to vary. And then some products are the same. It really is interesting. It's an interesting thing for me, because essentially if you're using marijuana, no matter how you're using it medicinally. You're using it to feel better. That's how it's always been used for decades and decades and decades. So essentially it really, I think it comes down to the state. Yeah,
and that's where it's funny, because in the state, pretty much in the United States, a lot of times I love recommending supplements to my clients, right? Like, hey, but we've got to do a disclaimer of, well, only stick with these brands, because in the United States, like, the FDA doesn't approve supplements in a lot of things. So from like literally, like, you can get a jar of, let's say, St. John's wort, and 20 of them might be the same level, 15 of them might be completely less. Sometimes they might have stuff in there that you don't even know what's actually in there. You see a lot of football players will get busted because there's things in there that are not being labeled and put in there. So it is always like making sure we're getting what it, like, the clients are getting what it is that they want.
Absolutely.
And now if you can't talk about this, I totally understand, but is there now a new challenge now? Because with marijuana, a lot of times it's been about health and safety. Then in the news, we've been seeing a lot with the vape oils and the vitamin E, I think, is what they're thinking with an extract. Is that, is there going to be a challenge that now?
Ohio, the testing labs have been very... they're under a lot of their own kind of regulatory things that they're following also. We've actually gotten a lot of PSA announcements from a lot of the cultivators that are producing the vape cartridges, assuring us that none of those fillers, that acetates, that sort of things are in the vape cartridges. So I think here in Ohio, especially with it being so new, and then this kind of information coming out, really kind of puts us all kind of like in a higher state of awareness, what is actually going into our products. But I will say with full confidence that the cultivators that we are working with are doing everything that they can to provide the safest product available.
Is that something now you feel like, okay, like, you're big on educating the public? It's like, all right, we'll have to add that layer now to it of letting them know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's always evolving. We try and be as transparent as possible with our patients, and, you're always going to have some kinks along the way that, you have to evolve with it. You have to be open and educate yourself as well as others.
I think it's just like, it's like with any business. I think nowadays we're thinking a lot more of what we put in our bodies, whether it be our food, our vegetables, it's even like what I've learned. I did a lot of organic farming this year, and I was like, just because it says organic doesn't actually mean it's like you have to be cognizant of.
Well, I think as a society we're waking up to those things, that we do need to take it into our own personal lives to be a little more educated with what we put in our bodies, and not just take for granted what we always have or what we may think is best for us.
Absolutely. And do your own research, at the end of the day. And even, while I'm out educating, it's about patients being mindful of, especially when it comes down to cannabis products, what's working for them, the THC breakdown, the CBD breakdown. We may not always have that strain that you bought last week, but at least if you know that percentage breakdown and what actually worked for you, and you're keeping tabs on your own health and how you're feeling, then we can best serve you and be able to pick out the products that work the best.
And I think, and that's where I think I really dig a lot of what you guys are doing, because I think it is like twofold, because this might sound trivial, but like, I'm a big car guy, and like literally, like, you can buy 5 different parts, right? Now they might they have the same horsepower gain, but if you know the products and how they're manufactured, we're not going to do that because that should be man-drilled out, and they do the easy way around it. They just cut it and weld it, and in under certain circumstances that weld is it's just a cheap way of doing it. And I think you're educated on it. What brands do certain things, and you stick with that.
And all of our patient concerns consultants are educated as well. We provide staff education weekly, monthly from these cultivators. So that way when patients come into our store, they're getting the most recent, the most timely education possible in order to help them navigate our menu the best.
Well, it's just kind of like, the way I look at you guys are like Walgreens or CVS. I mean, I don't go into Walgreens and CVS. Like, I could sit there and do the research on, is Teva Pharmaceuticals better than this or whatever, but you trust that you got, CVS and Walgreens are picking the right products, and they're not going to give you something that's substandard, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where I think it's kind of like, it sounds like what you guys are trying to do of, like, we want you guys to trust that everything that you guys have coming in, we're putting it through our own paces.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are vetting every single cultivator, really being extremely picky about the products that we are selling and providing.
Yeah, because when we had 710 Labs on here, that was one of the big things. They really took they took us on a tour and going, everything they do, they made an effort. We're not using solvents. We're not doing this. I mean, it's like Absolutely. There are no, and even educating us on the oils and how it should be and no additives. And it's like, you start realizing that there's companies that are out there to make a buck, and there's companies
Absolutely.
out there to make good product, and some companies are not going to, compromise on that at all. I remember 710 was like, dude, we can have people come in and invest in us, but we ain't changing a fucking thing that we're doing.
Sure.
Absolutely.
It's like you're investing knowingly. We are not gonna. I don't want to hear about this is going to be cheaper. No, this is how you make quality.
Well, they're very proud of their product, just like Terrasana is very proud of their brand.
Absolutely, and in Terrasana too, we have put together such an amazing staff, from our bud tenders up to our corporate, up to our founders. We all have really awesome backgrounds, nationally, so we can bring to the table as far as cannabis education. And at the end of the day, it is patients first. It's what's the best product that we can provide for them at the best price point. And then, especially with our education outreach and just everything that I'm doing as far as getting out into the community and educating everybody and anybody we can, just on this plant.
So let me ask you, this is one I'm actually really curious about, because I remember when I heard about all the, the cards being kind of put out there. I've been keeping a close eye on it, but I guess they released the first, it was about a year ago when everything started opening up. So it's kind of like a State of the Union. And one of the big things they put out there saying that out of all the people who've been given cards, only 30% of them are actually using them. Mm-hmm. You do a lot of that. Why is it only 70% aren't even doing anything with it? What have you found?
Yeah, I honestly believe that patients are learning to trust the program as a whole. That's why, Terrasana is committed to patient outreach programs and education. For me personally, I believe it's all about building trust within our communities and educating the public. So that's why we have, our meet and greet days where we're bringing a lot of these cultivators out and into our dispensary. So while patients are sitting there waiting to go back into the dispensary, they can sit there and actually chat face to face with the cultivators and the people behind their medicine.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm insanely passionate about kind of closing those communication gaps, because I think it's so important to, all of us work together as industry professionals to be able to bring that education to the patients, be it cultivators, the clinics, dispensary. It's really just about bringing that education to them. So that's one of my favorite things that we've done so far, is actually bringing the cultivators to the shop.
And I think that's cool. I think it's kind of like when you go farm to table, with restaurants or your farmer's market. It's
Absolutely.
Like you get to talk to the person doing
Absolutely.
it. And I think people dig a lot of that.
They do. We've had a ton of awesome feedback. The cultivators will bring, their educational materials and that sort of thing for patients to be able to take a look at and take home. Kind of they're more open to ask the questions that maybe they would have been a little anxious to ask, before then, but they're there, and, it really opens up that education.
I know one of the most interesting things, I have clients that have their cards, I have friends who have, cards, and I know, in really prepping for the show, I was like, I'm kind of curious, talking to people about, what they think about just the process. Are they using their cards? Are they not using their card? And I would probably say the same kind of numbers, majority aren't quite using it, at least in the state of Ohio. And when I asked them, hey, listen, why is it that you're not using it? I would probably say the majority of the answers I've gotten are the prices are way too high. And just because there's not enough dispensaries, it's every time they go down, it's I try to go on my lunch break and it's a 2-hour wait. I try to go in after work, it's a 2-hour wait. And then a lot of times I hit the cutoff time of when you're able to get in line.
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of people, I think from at least a pricing perspective, and even like from why there's only a couple of dispensaries, a lot of people really don't understand everything that goes into.
Absolutely.
So what do you think, so for those people, if you're talking about if a lot of what you guys are doing is how do I educate people to lower the anxiety, but if a lot of them are saying it's those two big reasons, what is it that you would like to talk to them and tell them and help them understand about the cost, the lines, just what do they need to know about why it is the way that it is?
Well, I'll speak to the lines first.
Yeah.
I know that we are working very hard in order to bring those wait times down.
Yeah.
With Grandview being the first dispensary to open in Central Ohio and, really just kind of being the biggest one in that area, I know that we've had little growing pains and kind of snags that we've had to work through since March, but I know now they've really done a great job of trying to lower those wait times. To speak to the price point, it's hard to say. A lot of these states, when they first come online, either recreationally or medicinally, the prices are high generally. It is a supply and demand thing. We see costs kind of ranging for their medical marijuana referrals. They kind of range all over the place between $200, $300, sometimes $400 in some cases. Yeah. And so, when you look at the prices in the dispensaries, we are really at the whim of the cultivators and what their prices are. And really the majority of it too is they have to go through so much on their end as far as getting everything tested to make sure that it is up to Ohio standard and the standards that we want as patients. We want good, clean medicine that works, that's not full of pesticides, it's not full of, all the other crap that we see, on the street and even other states that aren't really up to par with their testing labs. So, really, you pay for the quality. And I have faith that the prices will come down hopefully within the next year. That's what I've kind of heard. So,
and that's the thing. I think a lot of people are kind of pointing like, oh, everyone's just trying to make money. And it's like, I don't think people really understand the cost to set up on the dispensary side in Ohio, the cultivation side. I mean, you have cultivators who were approved a year ago that are literally just waiting for their stamp so they can start doing it. And it's, and I know you can't speak to this one, but I know from people I've talked to, the state has dragged their feet a decent amount. So it's tough. And I just don't think people really understand. Like, you could go down to Oklahoma and start up a dispensary for $200,000. Here, it's like $2, $3, $4, $5 million. And
but Emilie made a good point that it's quality, and so what consumers and patients need to understand, it's the age-old saying, but it's always true. You get what you pay for.
And Ohio is keeping it locked down. They're making it very
right.
Yeah, I have a client who they run a consulting firm. And their consulting firm does the FDA, not for food safety. They transferred it over to horticulture and growing, and it's he goes, it's like surgical precision, and the state is making it to where you can't put anything out that doesn't meet that criteria. You can feel good about it.
Which is great. In my opinion, that's great.
That's how it should be.
That's how it absolutely should be.
And it's just, in the beginning of any industry. And so I think people need to understand. It's like, listen, you wanted medicine. You got your medicine. You want quality medicine. You got it. It's the infancy. You have multiple administrations that have differing views, but it's where it's at. It will get better. And it's like, give it some time.
Well, and it's like when you go to the grocery store, you can buy, the cheap food. Or you can choose as a consumer to spend more money to get, your organic food or your local
quality
food.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of what it comes down to.
And going back to your point, Mike, I think honestly, the more cultivators come online, the more testing labs come online, the more processors come online, we will see prices come down, because right now we only have a handful that are up and running.
And I think even to the line perspective, it's like there's only 2 dispensaries in Columbus. It's like, that's it. That's all you got. And you guys were the only game in town for a while. And so it's like, yeah, our lines are long, but there's literally one. There's now 2 of us. It's like,
Right.
What can you do?
And shout out to all of our patients that were so patient with us and kind.
There we go.
Are you guys like trying to think of like stuff to do to like entertain them? Like you know, like you have bands playing? Do you have like a really like cool?
You know,
like,
I wish we
what
could
are you guys
do all
allowed
of that.
to do?
We try and be as entertaining as
like
possible with all of our beautiful personalities that we have in that dispensary right now. Yeah.
You know, entertaining. You know, you can play like a podcast over the radio.
Yes,
you know?
we do play
like,
music. music. We do play music.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you guys could probably play.
We play music. We have a few of the local newspapers and stuff in there. We do have our menu provided on the front desk that they can take a look at, and ask questions, to kind of be a little bit more prepared before they go back in the dispensary. Because once they go back in the dispensary, we really keep our ratios 1-to-1. So one patient consultant per patient. And if a patient does want a more private educational experience, we do have that private room. They can go in and go ahead and have a consultation in there. But yeah, I mean, it's all about the experience, really, and our lines are going down. So.
Yeah.
Due to our lower wait times. They're doing a great job.
I don't know about the other people, but ours are going down.
Even though I'm not a patient, I can't speak to it because that is my neighborhood and it's my neck of the woods, and I drive by there on a daily basis, so I can speak to that from a visual standpoint that yes, it's changed.
Yeah, and it's absolutely great that we have all these patients that are able to have access to alternative medicine. So that's an amazing thing also. So I think too, it's really just about being patient with each other, going back to don't forgetting the why we're all here, knowing that, at the dispensary, we do have 4 locations now. We just opened up our 4th location in Springfield to kind of help better serve our patients that were driving those long distances up to our Columbus location. So it's really just kind of, knowing that we are here for you, that we are putting patients first, and it'll only get better.
And it sounds like, one of the questions I had, it sounds like you kind of answered like, hey, what's on the horizon to get the pricing and the lines down? It sounds like, hey, we're opening up more stores to kind of that way people aren't having to drive from outer areas in. The supply that it will come back, it will eventually with enough. Once everyone starts getting approved, we'll have more supply coming in, and it's just going to take I'm guessing about a year almost to have everyone come online and just start.
Well, sure,
the
it's
market
got to reach
adjusting.
Market equilibrium at some point, and just.
And too, because we've had such great relationships with our cultivating partners, we've been the first to have 1-to-1 tinctures. We've been the first to have the transdermal patches. So there are certain things that we've been able to really be able to provide to our patients that those products haven't been out yet. So we've really kind of had those amazing opportunities to be able to be the first in a lot of different ways.
Well, it almost seems like one, but that season going to sound awful trivial, but I think it's a good point. It's like, it's kind of like, listen, people have been trying to get pot legal for God knows how long, right? You finally get it legal, and it's like now we're bitching and moaning about lines. It reminds me of those on Anthony Bourdain. He was in South Africa, and he was talking to this old school guy that he was like under Afrikaner, rule and apartheid, and he was like talking about they have a new group of kids called the Born Frees, right? Where it's like anyone who was born after apartheid, they never knew anything about that. And so like we're just like happy that we have like equality and think, it's like we're all treated equal now. And he goes like the kids now are complaining like, why don't we have 5G? Why don't we have 4G internet? Like why is my cell phone service so bad? And it's like,
right,
it's like, guys, we literally been working so damn long to get something like this. It's like, and we're complaining about the lines are too long, or the pricing isn't quite what we want it to be. I mean,
right. And I do truly feel that we do have a little ways to go as far as ending the stigma. It is still a Schedule 1, so we all still have to be very cognizant of that fact, especially. And at the end of the day, we all can be our own educators in our own right. These patients that are going out, they're trying the medicine, they're seeing the benefits, they're feeling the benefits. Go out, talk to your family about it, talk to your loved ones, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. Look, I went to the dispensary, I tried this medicine. It is truly helping my body. Google endocannabinoid system.
It's okay to come out of the closet,
exactly.
is what we're saying to people, right? It's fine.
Exactly. It's a beautiful, growing industry that truly, truly puts patients first.
And I think people might be surprised how well it would be received, and that people would be wanting to have that education and actually talk to somebody and say, oh my gosh, I can actually talk to you. I want to know this. And what about this? And I think, that I feel has changed quite a bit as well.
It's always, I don't know. I think it's just funny culturally speaking, just how fast things change, but yet how nothing, nothing changes. It's just we're always gonna find something to complain about, because when prices come down, it's gonna be like, you don't have like the special Maui Wowie this strain from 1972. Then there's gonna get old timers going, all this new fandangled stuff. When am I gonna get tie stick? It's gonna be like, somebody's always gonna complain basically about something.
Sometimes human nature.
Now, I guess like when you look at, and I understand like some of these things you might be able to talk about, some you have to kind of tiptoe around, but like, what do you really look at as the biggest challenges for Terrasana in today's business environment, the legal environment, and plus just the games you guys got to play? I've looked into this industry pretty in depth, and between between the state, between just the very nature of how things get approved. I mean, like, what are your guys' biggest challenge? Because it's not just like running a business and getting people in. I mean, there's it almost feels like, I don't know, it seems like it's very challenging. Like, what do you guys look as your biggest challenges right now?
Honestly, it all comes down to education. We're working with the state and we're working with the pharmacy board, and they've been pretty receptive to a lot of the things that we've suggested, as far as like, well, maybe we could do, this maybe a little bit differently and that sort of thing. I feel like they're doing their best as well with navigating, kind of this new playground. We're all kind of here. We're all in this new industry here together. We all have to play with each other and play well in the sandbox. And so I think essentially, from the dispensaries to clinics to cultivators, we all should be in communication with each other and talking about what's working, what's not working. The biggest thing from Terrasana, our end, is just constantly just educate. Educate patients. When, I'm out educating and doing these seminars, it's teaching them, these are the 21 qualifying conditions. There's so many areas in Ohio, especially when you kind of get out into the more rural areas. We have a lot of our expos and different seminars and stuff that other kind of businesses and stuff put on that are more or less concentrated in Cleveland and Columbus. And now we've just kind of started branching out to Cincinnati. Well, in my opinion, it's insanely important to kind of get out to these rural areas where the education is more or less lacking. A lot of people don't even realize that there's a program. They don't realize that they qualify. They don't even realize, the benefits of cannabis and their cannabinoid system and just all of those things that, once you start talking with people, and they open their eyes like, wow, okay, this is something, and then you get in that conversation like, oh, I just heard on the news, or, what's this CBD thing, and it's different stuff like that, and it opens up that conversation. So I really think that, as this program gets teased out and as the prices come down and we start kind of really learning what's going to work best for Ohio, I think we all just need to give ourselves a lot of credit for coming this far. When I opened, Terrasana opened the first dispensary in Central Ohio. And so I was a general manager when that dispensary opened. And so it was just an incredible experience. And really, it's surreal to be standing in Columbus in a dispensary with all of our founders and our staff and everybody there, just like really taking it in that we're making history. Like, I never would have thought, even
you're
10 years ago.
Paradigm pioneers, you're trailblazers.
So I think it's really just taking a moment to pause and reflecting on, the great things that we do have in a state like Ohio, and really just kind of being aware of that and cognizant of that and being patient with ourselves and supporting each other, essentially.
That's been kind of tough, though. Any business, a lot of times, it is about being patient and sticking with what you do well, getting it down, and then before you move on to like anything else. But I also have to imagine, and once again, I know you probably can't speak directly to it, but it seems like a lot of people I've talked to where it's like, yeah, we have this problem, this problem, this problem. In a perfect world, all we have to do is A, B, and C, then they're solved. But it's like, well, we're not allowed doing A. We're kind of allowed to do B. There's parts of C we're allowed to do, but only before you do B, then you can do C. It's like, that has to be a little challenging, like, to have solutions that you're not allowed probably doing, or is that something like where you guys are having to put a lot of energy how to get creative with solving like line solution, pricing solutions, education, what you're allowed to say?
You're correct and absolutely right.
Leave it at that, Mike.
No, it's all, and that's the thing. It's like, I know.
Don't put Emilie on the hot seat.
That's why I was just like, not going to know specifics. But once again, that's an example of
Ohio
that's a challenge.
They are very picky about a lot of different things. So it really, and we're on the same boat with every other dispensary. We're all kind of under the same amount of scrutiny from the state as far as what we're allowed to say, not say, our advertising and that sort of thing. So, it can be challenging at times. For sure.
But in the end, it all still comes down to protecting the end user, the patient, whether
Absolutely.
it's on the state side, protecting the patients, whether it's on your side, educating the patients, and where is that synergy, and where does it, where do you marry the different entities to figure out, okay, how do we appease everybody, but ultimately in the end, it's really to help the patient.
Absolutely.
Like, now, what if, I don't know if the state or, if it's more internal training, but, when you look at, hey, where do you see the industry kind of going? What do you see the states opening up? Do they let you know at all as far as, hey, listen, so this is year 1, year 3, year 5, now, from do you guys have an idea of hey, this is where we see things going with the medical industry in the state as far as with what you guys are doing? Is it more just, hey, we want to open up our multiple places that way we can alleviate congestion? Where do you see the industries heading in Ohio?
Essentially the industry is constantly evolving. I would say one of the most exciting things about the industry is the consistent new research, the clinical studies, the technology, all of that. Those amazing new trends that are coming out. The more states that legalize, the more we'll be able to see a convergence of what are the new social norms around cannabis. Here in Ohio, patients now have legal access, and that's a huge step in the right direction, I believe.
Now, from a product perspective, I look at, 10 years ago, I didn't even know there was dabs or extracts or oils or tinctures, right? For the research that you guys have seen, are there new products where there'll be all new things coming out? What do you hear with the industry, with medicine, the more because you see that with medicine a lot of times, they'll find out what works about it, and then they'll actually come out with a new medication that isolates that one thing. What are you hearing with medicine and what the growers and the manufacturers, what do you hear them kind of talking about what's going to happen?
I think the world of edibles is always evolving also. You have the gummies, and, you can make brownies and all kinds of things with that. Cultivators and processors can get pretty creative with those. Capsules, teas. I was in a lecture this past week in Oregon, and, one of the scientists was suggesting that, we take a bud and put it in our hot tea. That way we get the full gamut of all the terpenes and an entourage effect in order to help our bodies. That's out in Oregon, where it's completely recreational and legal out there, so they're allowed to suggest those sorts of things. But I just thought that was really interesting, that there's so many different avenues that we can take as far as ingesting the plant, that it really could be endless. It's kind of up to the creativity of the cultivators and processors, and really up to science. What's the best way to get, the whole plant, into our body as best as we can.
Yeah, and it seems like you were talking about it earlier, but it's there are THCA, THCB, there's a different CBDs. It almost seems like that is probably another big area where you might see specific things with certain types.
Oh, absolutely. And we're already seeing it. We're seeing it in the CBD world. We're seeing it in the medical cannabis world as well. They're really kind of narrowing down and breaking apart these cannabinoids, and really figuring out what those cannabinoids, what their jobs are, and breaking those down, and to be able to make specific products with those specific cannabinoid molecules, like THC, those sorts of things.
And this might be more of a 710 kind of lab kind of question, but you see, with any medication, there's a pipeline, right? From start to finish, it might be 10, 12 years by the time it goes through all the different FDA approval, the testing procedures. Do we see something similar, when you talk with the growers and the manufacturers, where is there a similar process now for medicine of it has to be tested out, to claim that it fixes what it kind of does? Is there any process like that at all that you're hearing from the manufacturers?
So here in Ohio, we're not allowed to make any kind of medical claims.
Okay.
And it really, that's just to protect the patient.
Right.
We don't want to be saying, blueberry does this and only this, it cures cancer. Like, we can't, they're just, you have to be very, very careful when talking with patients and the general public. You don't want to make those medical claims, because really cannabis is to help alleviate a lot of those symptoms. We're not suggesting it replace, any kind of medicine or pharmaceutical drugs or anything like that. It really is just down to, it's going to help you feel better. So essentially, from the cultivators, they have their own kind of, patterns and stuff that they have to go through as far as getting their stuff tested and processed and all of that Ohio regulates.
Yeah. And that's what's just interesting. Like, as things start kind of really getting honed in as your recreational side, but then because like even with like, let's say you go into bourbon tasting, they'll be testing out the bourbon, the alcohol content, because it can't go over a certain kind of amount. It's like, it's just going to be interesting of what's really going to happen, and the more we kind of learn.
Well, it's hard to speculate because until it's no longer a Schedule 1 drug, it's
right.
really hard to even speculate how all that's going to change, what it's going to change.
Yeah, because even right now with the the unfortunate news with the vape illnesses and that sort of thing, at the FDA, that it's not regulating anything that's going into these vape cartridges. Now, we know in Ohio, our cultivators are working very hard to provide the safest product, but, that's one of the things that, you need to be cognizant of as patients, when you are kind of out and about in the world. Just be aware of what you're ingesting.
Well, you got to. I mean, it's like the stuff that you hear about people buying Viagra off the street.
Right.
A lot of it's like from China and India, and like has like printer ink in it, drywall. I mean, literally. But that's the reality of like how many of these people that are getting sick or buying stuff. I mean, I heard a lot of it. They're buying their e-juice, not even like pot. They're buying e-juice off the street because it's cheaper.
Gosh.
They're buying it from China online in bulk.
Right.
So you do see that kind of like, well, if you buy like from CVS, like Terrasana, it's like, all right, well, at least you're not getting printer ink.
Absolutely.
You're not getting drywall here.
Yeah, well, we're very picky.
Yeah, and that goes back to driving home the point of the quality, and that when you're going into Terrasana, and regardless of what you think a fair price is, you're not buying junk off the street. So therefore, if you're going to go in and seek quality products, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And at least we know where to go now in Columbus. Pretty much. I don't know what anyone else is doing. They all suck ass, though. I don't even know the name. I don't know the names of them.
Nice.
What? Terrasana?
Nice. We love our friends.
Come on. We're all in the same sandbox, Michael.
Well,
we are in the same sandbox. And Terrasana does have 4 locations. So we have Fremont, our Garfield Heights location, Columbus, and our Springfield location.
Excellent.
Also.
Any other ones on the horizon, or is that kind of where we're chilling at right now?
Not at this moment, no, but there's always room to grow.
You have to sign an NDA. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess I would have to.
Always room to grow. Damn it.
All right, I'm not going to say anything. What about like a wink? Like, is there going to be one on the north end of Columbus in the next 2 years? You're not on camera, so...
Don't put her on the hot seat. I got to regulate.
I'm not going to put her on the hot seat.
See, this happens all the time. It's Mike's job to put you on the hot seat. It's my job to help keep him curtailed.
Oh, Lord.
But that's good. Ask the hard questions, Mike.
You got to ask the hard questions and everything, But I do think in all honesty, I mean, like, we do appreciate you coming on, because I know it's tough. I mean, what to say, what not. But I think the big thing that, I think our listeners really got an insight into just, what you guys are doing and why you guys believe in what it is that you guys do. I think you've delineated yourself and your brand, and, and just even more like, why do we do what it is that we do? What is this really about? This isn't, people go into business to make money, but it's like, nah, this is a stronger calling for all of us. If it was just about money, you guys would be doing something else. And I will give a shout out, just to our staff. They're all so passionate about the plant. I mean, it's incredible. So, as a patient, when you're walking into any of our locations, those bud tenders, over half our staff are patients ourselves. So for us too, that was one of the big things for us, is that we do have bud tenders that are patients, so they can really relate with a lot of the patients that are coming in. So we are going to be updating our website within the next few weeks. So stay tuned. Yeah, where can they find you guys as far as Instagram, Twitter, website? So we are on everything. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and then our website, terrasanacannabisco.com. Excellent.
Yep, so feel free to reach out. You guys have any questions or anything like that? I'm always here to help you guys.
Well, I always have questions, but I think I answered all mine, at least for, today, at least. But thank you so much for coming, Emilie. I mean, like
Thank
this,
you.
I know it's cool. I know you guys didn't have to do this, so it was really, really cool. I mean, learned definitely a lot. And I think just hopefully, you guys got your message out the way that intended, basically, too. And I think anyone can listen to this to understand you guys are legit. You're the real deal. And you guys are doing it all for the right reasons. And I think hopefully people will, take maybe a step back and kind of go, all right, dude, we got legal marijuana. Let's just chill for a little bit. Things will get a little bit better. But,
Sure.
It's not for profiteering. It's just the way the system is. But you guys are doing an awesome job, and so thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So I think on that note, Dom, I think it's time to go.
Let's wrap her up, Mike.
Let's wrap this things up. So, well, I'm Michael Devine. I am America's Counselor, and you've been listening to Gray Matters Radio. Of course, we got my man, Don Bustillo, campus correspondent, our sponsor, Canna Group. Thank you for being here as always, man.
Hey, like I said, I feel like it's Wayne's World with Noah's Arcade. I get to come on and be on, so it's always fun.
Yeah, except for I'm not like drawing like cue cards or anything. Now, it'll be on the YouTube video of me like randomly putting things up behind you, but you won't know that.
And hopefully and if our listeners out there don't know that reference, watch Wayne's World.
Please,
So
come on. All right, everybody. Behalf of myself, 614 Network. All right, I'm Michael Devine. Remember, everyone, next time someone asks you, you're a Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, whatever,